Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cosmic Chats. We have an amazing guest today, Lynn Dilmani. Lynn is zooming in from California. She is a stand-up comedian, has traveled all over doing comedy. So, Lynn, say a little what's up to everybody out there.
Hey, everybody. So good to see you.
Woo-hoo. If you haven't already, I'm going to remind you, if you're tittering about, shall I subscribe? Please do so. The nonprofit could really do with some help in getting those subscribers. And now we can start getting some monetization so we can do a large program to help lots of people get meditation. But now back to Lynn. So, Lynn.
Yes.
How would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never had one?
Well, bananas are like everything else that is that color. They're pretty nondescript for the most part. I mean, every now and then you get a yummy banana, but for the most part, they're pretty bland, like crackers and beige walls and, all the rest of us that are beige. We're not real spicy, but we're nice and yellow going down.
You don't think the banana is yellow? Are you eating brown bananas?
I had a dream last night that I had these bananas, and by the time I got home from the store with them, they were totally black. I'm like, that is bizarre. But they're yellow.
It's because you were thinking about doing this show.
Probably. But the banana on the outside is yellow, but once you peel the actual part that you eat isn't yellow, it's white, right?
Yeah, it is. It's white, not quite, though. It does have a tinge, doesn't it?
Yeah, slightly creamy colored. So yellow's only on the outside. And that's, I have a lot of friends who are different races and stuff. And I always tell them I'm only white on the outside because,
So you're kind of like a banana in reverse.
Exactly.
So it would taste creamy. How else?
I guess sometimes sweet, sometimes bland, depending on where you have gotten it. And if it's right, it's ready to be eaten, like everything else in life. If it's ready for it, if you're at the right time, it's going to be delicious. If it's not the right time, then you're going to wish you had waited a little bit,
So you are definitely a no green banana getter.
No, not they've got to be exactly the right time. So you can't be green and can't be too brown unless you want to make banana bread, and that's a whole different story.
Are you the Goldilocks of bananas?
I am. I like that.
You got the hair and everything. All right, next question. When did you have your first existential life crisis as a child?
I think it was probably right after I was born. But when that question is like, I'm from the era, not like the kids these days. I was raised in the era where you were a child, you were to be seen and not heard. Nobody wanted to know your feelings. You didn't have any feelings as far as they were concerned. And if you cried, I'm from the South. And so the thing is, when a child cries, the parent then says, you want me to give you a reason to cry? You want a reason to cry? I'll give you a reason to cry. And then the next thing you know, you're out in the yard looking for a switch that you're going to get beaten with. So, as a child, I was raised in a very different environment than today's children. So they didn't even understand existential crises or anything like that. So we were just depressed little children that spent most of our time outdoors because nobody wanted us inside. And back then it was legal to kick your kid outside and say, go play, and lock the door behind them.
Which state did you grow up in?
My mom moved back and forth between West Virginia and Northern Kentucky. So both kind of like the top part of the southern states. And, we did the hillbilly March of the Penguins. We went from West Virginia to Kentucky back and forth most of my life. So.
When you now know what the term existential life crisis was, right? Like, you know what it is now. You have your intelligence, your consciousness. But when we're very young, we can't necessarily articulate those words. But we know something is.
Yeah.
And so your first moment was when?
I guess probably in my teen years, as far as what I can remember, because I blocked out most of my childhood, you know.
Just to get through the day.
Exactly. You just pretend that part of life didn't exist. So, you know, and I was one of those very unpopular kids, you know. I was fat and I had pimples, and, you know, I was not athletic. I had no abilities at all. And so, you know, life was pretty tough, you know, when I was a teen and stuff. And then I guess when I was about 15, I lost a lot of weight, and I went and worked on a horse ranch for a summer in Kentucky. And I guess that was where I finally started to come out of my shell a little bit, because I'd been very shy up until recently, I guess. You know, I always considered myself extremely shy. As a child, I was afraid to even speak. And then in my teens, we would go to this horse farm where there were other teenagers our age, and, you know, muck stalls and ride horses and just have a grand old time. And I started to kind of realize that I was okay, you know, that I could have good things in my life possibly. So then I made the mistake of getting married when I was 18 and realized that that was not such a good thing. But, you know, that's a whole other
Now,
story.
wait, let's just go through that. You got married because you thought it was what you were meant to do, or you were getting an escape ticket out of there?
Well, I was 18. I was supposed to graduate from college, and I met my husband and spent all my time with him rather than college, spending my time on my studies. And I knew that I probably wasn't going to graduate. So he asked me to marry him. And I thought, okay, well, at least I'll have an event, you know. And
If in doubt, just have a party.
Exactly.
And one that society approves of.
Exactly. And I didn't know, you know, my family weren't good at staying married and stuff. And so I didn't know that was something you were supposed to get married to stay married for. So it was basically
He didn't give you a hint when you said the vows? Part?
Who listens to the vows? I was too busy thinking, should I just turn and run away? You know, would it look funny if I was going back up the aisle? You know, you know, I figured nobody else would ever ask me, and so I figured better to be a divorcee than a spinster. And, you know, because I'm 18, I think I've got all of life figured out. You know.
Yeah. Now let's look at that. You were needing to be approved by society as attractable. I don't know if that's really a word, but attractive, that you were able to check this box, right? Yes. It's approved, everybody. I got married, therefore there's validity. Do you feel that even though you said that you know, didn't come from an affluent upbringing, that was still important as a social what shall I say, validation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up, this was, you know, I was born in the 60s. And so when I was 16, one of my aunts looked at me and she's like, you're getting pretty old, you know, when are you going to get married? You know, and she was kind of half joking, but kind of not, because where I grew up, people were expected to get married young, have their children young, and then you could go on and do whatever you wanted to do with your life. But you weren't really expected to, especially women weren't expected to have a career. You were expected to just get married and have children. Mm-hmm. But I always wanted to be a nurse. So, you know, I ended up being a nurse too, but that was always kind of not really what was expected of me.
Right, right. And did you feel rebellious about that, or you were okay with doing that? I'll just get married then.
Yeah, you know, when I was younger, I swore I would never get married, you know, because I'd seen what marriage happened like. But then it was like, okay, you know, I'll just check that off the list while I'm young. I'll get married, and then I'll go on and do whatever else it is I want to do with my life. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. And like I said, things back then were a lot different. You know, now females can have so many, the world is their oyster. There are so many options for them. But when I was growing up, I mean, you could be a nurse, a teacher, a stewardess, a waitress or a mom. Those were pretty much your career choices that you were expected to choose from. So,
and that's fascinating because the 60s was a whole movement against that with the hippies, right?
right.
And yet you were born in the 60s and still that was ingrained.
Yeah, but I was born in the 60s, so I missed the fun part of the 60s because those people were in their teens and 20s, right? And so I was a baby. But I was born obviously to not hippie culture. I was born to poor white Southern culture. And so it was a different, they looked on the hippies as, ooh, those are not good people, So
and what were the prejudice towards hippies?
I think that the Southern culture are very prejudiced, and you are from another country and you came here, I think straight to California from what I remember of your story, right?
Yeah.
So you've never really been in the South, and it's a very interesting place, and I never really bought into all the prejudice of the South. So that's why I had to leave, because I'm like, I just did not fit in with this culture. And there's a lot of wonderful things about the South, but there's also a group of very, they have their beliefs about what is right and what is wrong. And, it's a Bible Belt. And so you're expected to follow a certain way of behaving. Now, my mom was a little bit of a wild child herself. And so she didn't go to church. I was raised a heathen my whole life. And, and most of her family is pretty wild. We're not the clean cut church going, wear a dress down past our knees kind of group of people. But, you also, when you're growing up in an environment, you're seeing, a lot of different stuff. And so you either adapt or leave. And so I left, but not before marrying a Persian during the Iranian hostage situation in the South.
So this was not when you were 18, this was later?
No, that was when I was 18.
Oh, okay.
I married him, the Iranians had taken Americans hostage back in the 70s, right? And so at the end of the 70s was when they released us, and a bunch of Persians came down to the college I was going to at that time. And all of a sudden, I grew up in an area where it's pretty much white and black. That's it. In Bluefield, West Virginia, where I was, there was not a lot of diversity, And so all of a sudden there's all these gorgeous Middle Eastern men, who are there going to school. And it's like, oh, they are gorgeous, and I grew up with a bunch of blonde, blue-eyed people. And I always wanted to have the olive skin, the black hair, the dark eyes, so I married it so that my kids would have it.
And did it work out like that?
It did. My old very Middle Eastern.
Yeah. Your plan worked.
Yes, it did. So.
Did they not have the same prejudice towards your husband as hippies?
Oh, yes. The prejudice was probably worse. I mean, when I married him, I faced a lot of issues with my family who were very against it and sat me down and had a long talk with me. How could I do this? And the preacher at my church refused to marry us. And so we had to find a different preacher to marry us. One of my physicians gave me a lecture about, and so a lot of people lectured me about that I should marry my own kind. And
your cousin,
my own kind. Yes, my cousin. Exactly. I didn't have brothers, so, I had to go with cousins. So. But yeah. And I thought I was marrying my own kind. I was marrying a human being. After many years, I wished I'd listened, but that's a whole different story. It had nothing to do with his race.
Right. So you were very aware that even though you were following the norm, you were not completely following the norm.
No.
You were sort of at the end of sort of the broad spectrum, and you were maybe a few clicks over. But you checked the married box, right? Now, obviously, there was a perception shift again because you did not remain married. What was your perception shift that changed how you viewed the world after you got married and you checked the box? And what?
Well, I think that, most people end up married for the wrong reasons. if you really sat down and questioned people before they got married, you're expecting it to fix something, or you're expecting something in your life. And, for me, it was just going to be a temporary thing. I didn't realize he wanted to stay married. If I had realized that the marriages were supposed to last longer, I might have paid a little more attention before I chose the person I was going to marry. Don't get me wrong. I've got 2 wonderful daughters and, some adorable grandchildren because of that marriage. So, I would never want to undo that. But, I wish that I had put more thought into it, because those red flags that become an issue after you get married, you tend to not really notice if you're not really, paying attention. And since I wasn't really considering the full ramifications of what I was doing, I ignored a lot of red flags,
So really the social status, which is still in society, right, of a marriage rather than a union. Right, that it is said, if people take traditional vows, the word union, but that very much is not where the social consciousness is of what a marriage actually is. It's 2 people coming together in a union. It rather than get married, you'll be okay, society, it will be sorted out, you're good, right? And however, your life experience was watching that not work. So I'll check it off, even though I don't expect it to work, because that's what you had been taught, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And how have you found, as you are now not in your 20s and through the decades have gone, your perception has changed of marriage? Would you get married again?
I've learned to never say never. But
well, we'll keep that out of it then.
Exactly. It would be very hard for me to get married again because of just the trauma of the past. And, it was a very messy divorce and stuff. And so to entrust another person enough with that much of my life, and when I first left my husband, it was about 14 years ago. And so I was already, I was in my 40s, and I was just miserable. So I'm like, okay, I'd rather be alone and, find maybe the person that I'm meant to be with. And then after I left him, and dating as an adult is much harder even than dating as a younger person, because you meet a whole bunch of different people who are at different levels of their life expectancy, and so there's a lot of different set behaviors also. And as I've gotten older, I find that I'm not as willing to put up with certain things, and luckily since I left him, I've done a lot of soul searching. And so I've done a lot of work on myself and, figuring out who I am, because when I left him, I really didn't know who I was. I knew that I was, I saw myself as just a mother, a nurse, a business owner, all of these other things, a wife, a friend. But if you asked me what I wanted in my life, I had no clue anymore, because I'd spent my whole life catering to everybody else. And so, it's been very, an interesting journey, a very traumatic journey at many times. But, over the last several years, especially the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I've done a lot of really deep soul searching, doing a lot of listening to these talks based on The Secret and on, how to bring things into your environment, how to attract what you want and that kind of stuff. And I finally realized that it's all about my inner being, what I get in this life. And so if I'm constantly stressing on, I don't have the man, I don't have the amount of money I want, I don't have the house, and blah, 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 that's what I'm going to keep bringing into my life, and I've been doing a lot of reading and stuff, and it all seems to go towards, to get into that right headspace, you have to meditate. And for me, that's always been a struggle, because I'm like a total type A personality, and I sit down to meditate, and it's like, okay, we're gonna meditate, okay, well, what's happening? And my mind goes off, and I can't really focus and bring it in. Now I can sit and like engross myself in a good book or something. And that's, I've discovered, a form of meditation where you don't hear other things because you're engrossed in what you're doing. But when I think, okay, I'm going to meditate, all of a sudden everything comes into my world. And so, or into my mind. And so learning to just focus on, to let those things go. One person I listened to said, oh, just say, thank you for sharing to your different thoughts and stuff. But
well, part of the challenge with that is just as you grew up in a system that people get married, is what I call systemic meditationism. Mm-hmm. And this is this lie that everyone has taken on board, that mm-hmm. meditation means fill in the blank, right? And it goes from mainly one is supposed to clear one's mind mm-hmm. and have no thoughts, right? And be somewhat magically enlightened. And if this is true, then mm-hmm. abundance will come. And abundance actually has a few strings according to this illusion that we have all bought. And that means amazing amounts of numbers in the bank account, and amazing amounts of property, that the physical visage is a certain way, the career is also a certain way, and that's absolutely twaddle. The meditation basically goes into two forms. One, mm-hmm. concentration, and a second is non-directive, right? So the concentration technique, if we have the word meditation, right, it comes from the Latin, and I always mispronounce this, so have to forgive me, meditatio, I think. I always want to say toe as in toe, T-O-E, and that's not it. And that was, who was writing down the Latin? The monks, right? And they're focusing on Christ, right? And so their practice was to literally look at the book and place their attention on that. They're not dealing with traffic. They're mm-hmm. not dealing with divorce, mm-hmm. Children, paying the bills. No, it's a completely different realm. So for them to be still, they're already being silent, as it were, right? What they're doing is attempting to place their attention on that for what they need. Then the other side of meditation, right, which is non-directive, which goes by the mind. And the reason why your mind moves very quickly is because it goes by charm. And that's why you can read a book and spend hours immersed in the book, because you're going by charm. It's charming to find out what happens next. Yeah. They didn't. No. Next page, right? Yeah. It's not charming to sit in a position which we're told to be in, stacked upright, cross-legged. And again, now this comes from more of an Indian, right? The Eastern philosophy, but they never got to a high chair, which means they always sat on the floor cross-legged, even as kiddies. So their hips can support them sitting comfortably upright. Hello, Westerner, let pop you in a high chair. Right? If you've ever gone to India, and those of you who are listening, you'll notice the Westerners, after about 30 minutes, they're like, oh, my hips. Oh, my hips, right? Oh, I just clicked. It's not comfortable, right? So automatically we think, oh, we're failures at it because we have to sit this way. Now, if we're doing a focusing practice, we might want to be more alert, right? Great, have good posture, right? Mm-hmm. And so then the mind comes in. It's quite normal it can be about 3 breaths, and then it starts. And normally, whenever we close our eyes, what happens is we go inward, just naturally, right? We go inward and we start to process the stress of the day, what happened, what they said, what I shouldn't have said. But when we add an additional stress of, I'm supposed to not be thinking, I'm supposed to be this way in my life. Let's think what else I'm supposed to be. I was supposed to not be blonde. I was supposed to not have that issue as a child. All of this stuff then comes up, right? Yeah. And it's actually a way of processing through stress. But when we're told that's not what meditation is, right? It's only concentrating on something. No wonder everyone thinks they can't do it. Absolutely not, right? Now, the practice that Vedic meditation does, that aware meditation loves, is it's a non-directive practice. Mm-hmm. So it's going by charm. And when you talk about the law of attraction, which is all about our inner vibration, right? So it actually goes back to the Vedas, it goes back to the rishis, where they were listening to sound and source and connecting inward and being able to have, creative visualization actually all comes from that. It's even though it might be sounding like listen to Abraham Hicks, it all comes from that deep, deep, deep source, right? Same thing that was actually being told in the Bible as well. Right? It's actually, right, all comes from that deep source. It's about connecting inward to that, and sound is part of a vibration, right? There's a vibrant people who are musicians, right? And so in this practice, there's a sound that's given to charm the mind to go inward, because we've got so much distraction, but we're naturally going to go off, right? This is natural. If we're fighting going off, what are we doing? We're resisting what's happening. We're resisting the present moment. Now, as a comedian, you cannot resist the person in the back. If they keep making noise, you have to address it.
Yeah.
It has to be addressed, right? Either someone takes them out or you call them out, right? Then suddenly everything becomes rejuvenated and alive, and everyone's leaning in. Well, what's she going to say next? Yeah. Right. And so it's the same way with meditation. If we have something going, oh, no, I'm not supposed to have these thoughts. I'm not supposed to be this. I'm not. What we resist continues, which is that same source of that vibration that they talk about with law of attraction, right? All I'm doing is manifesting that I don't want to.
Exactly.
Right. Which is why when people say it doesn't work, it's because they're focusing on what they think they want, but actually is juxtaposed. So I want to be out of debt. I want to be out of debt. I want to be out of debt. Let's just say that's it, right? We'll make that up. I want to be out of debt, right? That focus attention of it is placing attention on it. Right. If it creates an action in the waking state, get a second job, ask for a raise, change my career, that's in the law of attraction, right? That's moving forward. If it's still, I got to get out of debt, what happens is it sinks in, right? It's an inward, it's implosive, not expansive, right? So we want to be expansive in the idea of possibility, right? And just as a little kid, when they get excited about something, ice cream, as a grandmama, you probably know the joy, and they're jumping up and down, like physically, right? Their vibrations are moving up and down. They're so excited, right? Because we all love that. Just yummy, 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 right? That is then what goes out to, we'll say, universe for right now. But even if you have a religious belief too, that then changes the modality. So it's like pay over the minimum payment, get that done, and continue with where to create. Because creativity, it's not simply being on stage or performing or being an artist or a musician. No, it's in everything that we do. And when we're in that space, we can start to cognize more efficiency. So often doing less, we accomplish more, right? But this idea of meditating, clearing the mind, especially if someone has a very busy, active mind, right? Most of the time, all people are doing are thinking about clearing their mind. That's it. Now, when I have my own practice that I love with Vedic meditation, at the end of the time of that, I'm absolutely in that space where I can absolutely, as they talk about in the law of attraction, be able to be listening to what's coming down. And that's when there is true attraction, right? Because these ideas like being sold, get married, right? Oh, I've got to get this, I'll be this in my career. Some of that is actually not what's honest for our own individual vibration. We've just been sold that lie. I'll have 2 of those, please. Thank you very much. Right. And that's what we do to be normal or feel validated. However, if truly inside, that's not what's going to light us up, the whole of our lives, we're attempting to doing this, fighting it. And then there's the justification. And the great part of wisdom getting older is, I don't need your approval anymore.
Yes.
I don't want to do that. Or as I've seen, there's such a wave of women after maybe the age of kids going, who get into comedy, right? And it's, first of all, it's great, right? More women's voices out there. And especially when that old idea of, oh, you're off, you're a shelf life, right? And that brings up creativity, inspiration, right? Being bold, being out there, which is listening to that inner voice. And when you write for comedy, to be authentic, for it to vibe without stealing other people's jokes, it requires that inward search, right? Going inward to, oh, that's funny. I wonder if it's funny to other people.
Right.
Right.
But I know with me, with the comedy is where I finally really started to delve into my feelings, because when I first took my first comedy class, and the instructor was like, how do you feel about that? You have to write down things about yourself, and then, they help you to figure out jokes based on it. And I'd be like, I don't know how I feel. I mean, I was never raised with feelings. I was always told, you have no feelings. We don't care about your feelings, kind of thing. And so all of a sudden I've got this comedic instructor saying, how do you feel about that? And then I was in therapy, and she's like, how do you feel about that? And it's like, stop it, people. I don't want to know about feelings. I put a wall around my heart years ago. It's all good. We don't need feelings in this life. But then I started taking some in-depth classes with Dat Fan, the comedian. And he really helped me a lot to hone my comedy and to realize that, first off, time plus pain equals comedy. And so you take the deepest pain in your life and find a way to spin it to make it funny. And that makes for the best comedy. And, you really delve deep into your inner self with doing that. And I found that, and it was also, he helped me to like, what is your voice? And he introduced me to his instructor, and I took some classes with him too. They helped me to understand what is my theme and what is it that I really want to tell in comedy. And, I've been described by from different comedic instructors and stuff that I've taken, as the lovable loser. But yeah, but when I get on stage, and like I told you, I was extremely shy growing up, and I could never imagine myself, fast forward as an adult, standing on a stage in front of hundreds of people and telling them these details basically about my life and having them laugh. And, when I first got on stage, I had that first time, and it was a packed room at Flappers in Burbank. It was like a couple hundred people in the room. And with every punchline, everybody would laugh. And when I got off stage, several people came up to me like, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, this is my first time, But over the years, I run into different people, and my following, most of the people who typically really enjoy my comedy are women between the ages of like 30 to 55 or 60, because they come up to me after my shows and they say, I relate so much to what you said. And I realize if she can make it through that, I can make it through my divorce or my, whatever. Mostly it's women going through divorce who, because that's the point in time when you really start to reflect on your life. I think when you go through a traumatic life event, like a divorce or a death or something like that. But when you have spent most of your life with people, and then all of a sudden you are alone, it forces you to really look inward.
Yes.
And the comedy really helped me to look inward, and working with certain instructors, has really helped me to delve deep into who I am, and the comedy and acting actually helped me more than therapy as far as figuring out my inner being and what makes me tick and what I want in this life.
Yes, it's in action and going in and having a reflection. And so, the fundraisers that we do also help support comedians as well. The Cosmic Comedy Show was done during the early parts of lockdown with people from all over the world performing and dialing in to bring laughter, because laughter was needed to help people breathe, for the audience, but also for the performers. Because if you want a problem with mental illness, then just have performers not performing. Right. But all people come to comedy and take comedy lessons, not necessarily to become professional performers. That it is another avenue of getting into the root of the pain and flipping that, right? How do we flip that and then owning it? And then there's nothing more than in ways of owning something than standing up on stage and admitting it to a bunch of strangers, and then everyone unifying in laughter. And that vibration, when we talk about sound, can start to change one's own cellular physiology. And also in the audience with that as well. So if you want to find out about Lynn and when she's performing, the details are in the description where you can find her. And we're going to have her back for the second part, which is more fast and furious and a little bit more lighthearted. In the meantime, please subscribe. Please like.
Yes, subscribe now. Push that
share
button now.
your love for Lynn. Right. Please say how much you appreciate it. We are looking for you ladies. 35 to 55.
And I'm also looking for men 55 to 65. That's a totally different situation.
Totally different altogether. All right, we'll see you later. Cheerio.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.